Welcome to the Rowing on the Square podcast. Today's episode is one you don't want to miss. We are joined by three incredible voices from the coxswain seat and beyond. First, Johanna Knight. Coxing since 2006, she got her start at Holy Names Academy before moving to the Pocock Rowing Center, then went on to cox at both Loyola Marymount University and Orange Coast College. Most recently, she helped create the first para-coastal quad to compete at the World Rowing Championships against non-para athletes, reaching the B final. She is now on a mission to build community for neurodiverse rowers on and off the water and working towards new para categories for diverse rowers. Next, we have Brian Marcais, a walk-on at Rochester Institute of Technology who became the men's top varsity coxswain. Brian went on to coach at Brighton Rowing Club, Rochester Rowing Club, Boulder Community Rowing, East Bay Rowing Club, and Oakland Tech before landing his current role as director of the U15 program at Oakland Strokes. He also serves as a development coach for U.S. Rowing Para Rowing and is now building a new adaptive program at the Lake Merritt Rowing Club in Oakland. And we also have Alexandra Walsh, a 16-year competitive figure skater and two-time Team USA athlete who walked on to Eastern Michigan University's Division I rowing team with zero experience and earned 4 varsity letters from 2020 to 2024. Growing up with autism, Alexandra found her place in the sport through the coxswain seat and now coaching both competitive and para athletes while advocating for inclusion at every level. 3 coxswains, 3 stories, 1 conversation you won't forget.
Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for being a part of Rowing on the Square, the podcast. And I'll have you guys introduce yourselves and tell me a little bit about your rowing journey.
I guess I'll start since I'm already off mute.
Yeah.
Sure. I'm Brian. This is when everything's going to just stop working verbally for me.
No worries.
So I'm Brian. I'm Brian Marcais. I've been involved in rowing for about 30 years. I started actually in college at RIT. And my first experience with rowing involved a pretty good percentage of our rowers being from NTID, from the National Technical Institute for the Deaf. So pretty much my whole rowing journey in some way or another, I've been working with adaptive sports in some way. I started coaching while I was still at RIT. I did some large row work with Rochester Rowing Club and was one of the early coaches for Brighton High School rowing, and which is still going strong, which is great. And I've coached in upstate New York, in Colorado, out here in California where I am now. Currently, I'm the director of U15 programs at Oakland Strokes. I run a middle school program that's north of 115, 120 students at any given time. And I'm also a development coach for U.S. rowing for the para team.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Brian. Joanna, you can go ahead and introduce yourself to the podcast audience and fill us in on about you and your rowing journey.
Awesome. My name's Johanna. I've been coxing on and off since 2006. I started coxing because I had scoliosis surgery, like rod fusion surgery. I was heavily competitive in horseback riding at the time, and my doctor said that I would unfortunately not be able to do that anymore. My cousins actually rode down at NAC, Newport Aquatic Center in Southern California, and I went to one of their practices. They said that I should try coxing, that I was the perfect height and size, and I rode along actually in the boat with Lake Union crew not too shortly after that and really fell in love with it. I started my coxing journey, my novice year at H&A, Holy Names Academy. Shout out Rachel Wong, who's now coaching there. But I started my coxing journey there and then transitioned over to Pocock Rowing Center for the last 3 years in high school. I coxed at Loyola Marymount University for a short period of time, and then at OCC. Took a little bit of a break during COVID and the pandemic, and then I really got interested in para flat water rowing when I noticed that my tremor was a little bit more progressive. My range of motion wasn't as great as it had been, as aging does to one person, unfortunately. And so I reached out to Ellen Minzer, asked her how I could get involved, did a few things on the para flat water rowing side, like Biata Regatta, and then reached out to Ben and Mark of Next Level Rowing And we actually created the first para-coastal rowing quad in 2024 that competed at the World Rowing Coastal Championships. We were successful in that. And I am currently taking a little bit of a break now as I live in Utah, but very excited to tell the podcast what's happening and what Brian and I are thinking and making happen together.
Fantastic. It's such a great rowing story, great rowing journey. Everybody gets into rowing in different ways. And I love that you came from, I think of the idea of being horseback riding and then being the coxswain in the boat. I love that, marrying the same level of excitement and like almost the rowers being the representation of the horse after you make the switch. So I love that. Tell the podcast audience what you and Brian are working on right now, because this is super exciting.
Brian, do you want me to start or do you want to start?
I would love you to start.
Okay. So, as I had said, I had moved to Utah recently and just be close to around family and friends, and realizing that Utah doesn't really have much rowing and that I really miss being in the boat. And especially after my experience at Worlds 2 years ago, really missed the camaraderie of people coming together from different countries and including different people in different ways and being as inclusive as we could. I was recently diagnosed with autism level 1 and actually literally today got my results back for being ADHD as well, being diagnosed with ADHD. And so I was thinking about how we could build upon the journey that Mark and I took with Next Level Rowing and being like, okay, how can we keep on making new opportunities for people on the boat, especially just as the sport becomes more popular, with it being a whole new entity with Beach Friends in 2028. And that's when I had the idea with my diagnosis to create a whole new para category for a neurodiverse rower. And I know that they're out there, and I'm really excited. I messaged Brian. I knew about his involvement with Ellen and with flatwater rowing, and just really wanted to work really closely with U.S. rowing in general and trying to make this happen. And Brian, do you have anything more to say?
I'm not sure yet. Keep going.
I'm really excited. We have classifiers working with us, Adrienne herself, and we are trying to start at the local regatta level. Like Biata, we're trying to implement this in Biata somehow this coming year, and had the Hooch, maybe potentially it had the Charles, and just starting local and then growing it internationally. We have a group chat going on with international rowers as well, and with people from all over the country who are trying to work together to make this happen. So we're all really excited.
I think it's super fabulous that you're both working on this and trying to expand the umbrella of athletes that fit into the para category. And just for the people who aren't familiar with the para process, can you guys touch upon just how the process works right now? What levels of disability do they have under the para umbrella, and how do athletes get involved?
I'll take a little bit of that anyway. Right now, para mostly falls into 3 categories, and they're all really based on physical disabilities. So we have 3 categories: para 1, para 2, para 3. They used to be A, TA, and LTA. And so para 1 was that's arms, basically. It's basically just using your upper body. And these athletes usually need to be strapped in or they fall over. You're looking at somebody who's not going to really be able to use their trunk for much motion. It's really just, again, the arms and the upper body. TA is what we now call PR2, and that is what used to be trunk and arms. We're not using our legs for this. It's still a fixed seat. So PR1 and PR2 are both fixed seat rowing. We're so used to, for anything we've been doing with sliding seat, with flat water, having that sliding seat, having most of our power and momentum coming from our legs and our lower body, and that's not really possible for all people. So we have the PR1 and PR2 fixed seat categories where we're not using that lower body. PR3, you are now able to use your legs as well. And there's going to be some disability there that keeps you from completing the full or as strong of a stroke as what somebody who's not rowing para would be able to. And you're looking at things like, and for any of these, the disabilities can be very different. You could be looking at spinal injuries, you could be looking at limb differences or amputations. There's a whole range of things that could be affecting the athlete for this. As far as how to get involved, it's really it's reach out and say, hey, I want to be involved. And if you can, there are some places. Rochester's got a great adaptive rowing program. I know Dennis has since moved away, but I've known him since I started rowing. And you need to look, there's organizations out there that can help. Unfortunately, as with anything with rowing, your ability to do this sometimes has to do with your geographic location, how close you are to actual water to row on or a team to train with. And at this point, you're adding into that complication, do you have a place that's prepared to support adaptive rowers? I will say that most places are more prepared to work with adaptive rowers than they think they're able to. If anybody has ever worked with a master's rowing program, master's is adaptive. It just very simply is. And the adaptations change as your athletes age. There's a lot that goes into that. The switch from doing primarily master's coaching for me to doing the adaptive training was not that hard.
Yeah, I think that there is you're bridging that gap between it's definitely a spectrum of things that people need assistance with up until actual adaptive boats, but there's a lot of adaptations like you're saying that you would do for masters. And I believe the US Rowing website has some information on all the different disabilities that fall under the para umbrella. I believe there's a tab for it on there. Work through that to see if something that's part of who they are is one falls under that umbrella. So that's one resource that people could use. And you guys mentioned Ellen, I believe her email address is readily available on the US Rowing website, and you can contact her. She's very approachable, and you can get more information. You touched upon RCIR, Rochester Community Inclusive Rowing, which is within the umbrella of the Rochester area, and they're a great program. It's a completely volunteer program. No one pays to row. No one gets paid to coach. It's a completely volunteer experience. It allows people to access rowing and to have a plan to stay within the boundaries of rowing without having to incur quite a significant cost. There's programs like that out there. Tim Giarusso and Dennis Fraunheiser are the leaders over at RCIR. Even though Denny's not here, Denny's kind of here in that sense to help. So if you're in the Rochester area and you're looking for that information, definitely check out RCIR's Rochester Community Inclusive Rowing. I think it's .org. And you can check out their website. And that's our first step in adaptive rowing for here in the Rochester area. But a lot of the teams do use RCIR as a resource, but also do things in-house. Just like you were saying, Brian, a lot of times you're going to make that adaptation for your athletes in order to keep them in the program. Alexandra just added to the call, and I'll give her a moment to introduce herself, and then she can join the conversation too. So Alexandra, go ahead and unmute and let the podcast listeners know about your rowing journey. So you can just tell us how you got into rowing and what you're working on in your rowing at this time.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Alexandra Walsh. I got into rowing my freshman year of college. I started college at Eastern Michigan University in fall of 2020. And I got recruited in a weird way as a walk-on. And that was sent over the summer. Thought I might try something new. I've been active my whole life. Besides rowing, I competitively figure skated for 16 years. So it's definitely a weird transition. I actually have been coxing since my freshman year. Loved it. Loved the sport the second I got into it. And then last year I moved to Boston for grad school at Boston University. And at that time I started coaching at CRI. I primarily coach one of the competitive teams and then work with some para programs such as Para ID, those with intellectual disabilities, Para Teen, and Para Sculling.
Fantastic. And we were just touching upon, Johanna had mentioned that her and Brian, and I assume you too, are also working to bring different classifications under the para umbrella. So if you want to touch upon how you're helping Brian and Johanna move through that, that would be fabulous.
Yeah, I can't believe I forgot that part. Yeah, I was diagnosed with autism at age 10. And then I realized that not many rowers, or college athletes for that matter, have autism, or at least have publicly said anything. I started looking for books not only about rowing, but neurodivergent athletes. And then when I realized there weren't any, I thought about making a change. I got in contact with Joanna. I've started writing my own memoir about my experiences as a Division I athlete with autism and how my coaches and teammates really accommodated me and never made it feel like a burden or anything.
That's amazing. And it's so helpful to be able to share our stories as rowers. I think that a lot of times, if there's something that you're dealing with as a rower, a lot of times it doesn't necessarily get brought to the boathouse. And it's not necessarily something that, like you said, you couldn't find any books on rowers with autism. And so to be able to fill that space and to get more information for neurodivergent athletes, that would be amazing. And I think this is such a great platform and a great cause to be moving forward and to open up rowing to.
Yeah, because I'm almost positive I'm not the only person who is neurodivergent in rowing. And especially with rowing, everything's so repetitive and driven, which makes it, in my opinion, perfect for neurodivergent people. And since I was a coxswain, the attention to detail was an amazing aspect of it for me. I'm really attentive to what's going on. I tend to focus on the smaller pieces of the puzzle and then work on implementing that into the larger puzzle. So if more people can find rowing and realize that it's inclusive to not only individuals with able bodies, disabilities, and then neurodivergency, that would be wonderful.
And what do you feel are the next steps that rowing needs to take in order to move in the direction of really being truly inclusive for neurodivergent athletes?
I can also chime in on that.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. I know Brian and I have been talking about this, and me and Alexandra as well. I just think that more disabilities and more neurodivergencies in general need to be highlighted and really spoken, like just having a voice and being willing to speak about it. I really want to commend U.S. Rowing for highlighting a couple of athletes that did this over the past couple of months, and highlighted stories involving their own mental health journeys. I think that should be a regulated thing, and just making that the norm and known, like what we're doing or trying to do, at least within us, like that this is going to be a continuous thing, and that it's like, it's here to stay. Like, it's not just some one-off thing. Like, we're making this the new norm. So at least that's my 2 cents. But if anyone else has anything they want to add, feel free.
A couple of things. One, World Rowing has already started to add some other categories in for their indoor competitions. I don't know if anybody else has seen that. And they do have some categories in there for the para classifications that are more based towards developmental, mental, and neurodivergence. So it's not solely physical disabilities that they're looking at for that. And that's based off of some Invictus and something else that they're basing that off of. One thing to remember is that a lot of what we look at for para sports in general, a lot of this is coming out of veterans organizations. That's where many of this began, really. The whole impetus for things like the Paralympics in general was really looking at people who had been in World War II, really, is when this started after that. And looking at things like Invictus and the categories that they have for their competitions is not a bad way to go about some of this. Another thing that I do realize is that adding a para category specifically is going to be a little complicated, because it's not just adding a category for a local race or something like this. This is something that is tied into the IPC, and what are we looking at with elite competition at the international level. And trying to do this at that more local grassroots level to begin with is a really good way to start this. So once you are at the point where you can say, hey, we actually have this cadre of athletes that is competing in these formats, it's a little bit easier to start moving forward with something along those lines. Right now, though, pretty much all the para categories across the board really have to do with physical disabilities and limitations. So it's going to be a little bit more of a stretch to do this. I see this as definitely as a long-term project. And we're definitely moving in the right direction on that already. There's already been a shift from when I started rowing to now as far as what people are, like you said, Alexandra, you're sure you're not the only person who's neurodivergent there. We did not admit to that 30 years ago. That's not something we would actually talk about. That's not something that we would really mention or want to do, because that was something that, it's not that there's not difficulties with it now, but the stigma in the 90s around that, it was not that this was part of you that you were dealing with. This is something that is wrong with you that makes you different from everybody else.
Yeah.
And it's not something that you would go up and say, I am doing this and I have ADHD. You wouldn't talk about it. You'd hide that as much as you can. And I'm very glad that we are going away from that some at this point. If you're not admitting to these differences and these struggles, it's really hard to do anything about them.
Yeah, can I bounce off of Brian real fast if that's all right?
Yeah.
So going off of what you said, where it's in the 90s, like more of a taboo topic, more of something you don't talk about. When I first started rowing, I told no one on my team freshman year that I had autism, right? Like you said, I thought it was going to be like this big thing. And I, at the time, was so little, not embarrassed, but just a little secretive about it. And I remember meeting with one of my coaches towards the end of second semester because my professor wasn't giving me my accommodations that were established by the university for one of my finals. And he asked me, why do you need them? And I remember I was like sweating. My hands were sweating. My face was flushed. And I really thought I was going to be like kicked off the team. Obviously, I know that's not true in the logical brain. So I told him, oh, I'm autistic. And he was like, cool. And then my coaches worked with me to get accommodations when we're in the ERG room. I really struggled with it being too loud sometimes. I would have earplugs. I could go take a break in the coach's office between pieces. And are you guys familiar with Dr. Temple Grandin?
Yes.
Yeah, and not. So fill me in.
Okay. She is an autism advocate. She was diagnosed at the age of 4. And she was nonverbal at the start. She's in her 80s now. But she has written numerous books about autism. She defied the odds, graduated high school, got a bachelor's, got a master's, got a doctorate, and was teacher at the University of Colorado in animal behavior. So some of my coaches actually read the Temple Grandin book, one of her books she wrote, to get into my head to see what I'm experiencing. So that was life-changing for me. I've never had anybody even consider that. I didn't know that was an option. So I was very supported at EMU, and not in an obvious way, not where it was a big thing, but more of the subtle changes that helped me succeed.
One of the things that, because this is, when you're looking at a lot of these neurodivergences, these are really invisible disabilities. This is not something that somebody's going to look at. I have one athlete I coach that you look at him and say, oh yeah, no, he doesn't have a leg. Okay, I get it. But if you look at us, it's not something you're going to see right away. And it ends up being this thing where we put a lot more work into doing things that people don't see. And it looks like things are a little bit harder for us. Nobody knows why, or maybe it looks like we're not trying as hard at something as someone else. And these are real things that really affect us that people just don't see and don't understand. And if we're not in a position where we feel safe to say that to somebody, that this is what I'm dealing with, they don't know. And the judgments that they give are not necessarily fair to the struggles that we have. Being able to be in a place where you're supported like that, Alexandra, that's huge.
Yeah.
And it's still not as common as we'd like it to be.
Of course.
It's getting better. But there's, like I said, it's a long-term progress with a lot to go in that. I had somewhere else I was going with that too, but I absolutely forgot where it was.
Yeah, with the challenges that people don't see. Before I was like again, not necessarily shamed or embarrassed, but I was more open about it to my teammates as I progressed through school and through the team. I remember working so hard with my coaches weekly. I had a weekly meeting with one of my coaches because I was struggling up until about the end of sophomore year with my calls. Not the technical, not the motivational, but the fact that I would talk with a flat affect. And I've been in speech therapy since I was in sixth grade, sorry, not 6 years old, to work on social emotional language, pragmatic language, such as irony, similes, sarcasm, stuff that's not innate for me. And again, I had a really supportive environment, and I'm eternally grateful for that. I was able to get my calls to a point where, okay, my voice has inflection. Okay, you can tell when we're in steady state and we're doing a race piece. So most of my team would not have known that freshman year. They're probably thinking, why is she so bored? When in reality, I'm not.
I want to make a quick point here. We are all coxswains, by the way.
Okay.
I kind of love that.
I appreciate you all. I appreciate you all. I sit in the seat every once in a while, and I'm just like, this is a lot. This is way more than I'm used to.
Communication is a huge thing. And yes, if this is something if you're neurodivergent, there are cues that you don't necessarily see or notice or experience in the same way as somebody else. And it's, the number of times that I've been in trouble for, oh no, you're right. It's not what you said. It's how you said it.
Yep.
I don't know how I said it. I just said it. Oh, yes. Yeah, not my only job. Yes, definitely has been an issue before. I'm late diagnosed ADHD, by the way. Figuring that out at 43, a lot of things started to make sense that really didn't before. This is, even though we can physically generally do the same things that other rowers or coxswains can do, there are some real issues with how we actually take in the process of information and how we're able to actually do what we're being instructed to do. Note that visually impaired athletes, if you're blind, you can be a PR3 VI rower. That is a thing. Because if you've ever tried to coach somebody who cannot see what you're doing, you start to realize exactly how much we rely on visual cues, on things that they can see, on things that you can't describe easily without coming back to that. Like, how do you tell somebody what position to sit in at the catch who may not have great proprioception and doesn't really understand what you're saying? You're trying to describe this to them, when if I working with somebody else, I can just say, okay, put your back like this, and great, this angle with your shoulders this far back, and it's easy. Deaf athletes are not eligible for para sports with that as their disability alone, for para rowing. And
Crazy.
having coxswain coached both, yeah, I absolutely see it. I've worked with some incredibly strong blind rowers, but it takes a lot more work to get the corrections coaching information across. There's a very definite parallel working with somebody who's neurodivergent. You have to be very creative as far as coaching, how to explain, how patient you have to be. It is not uncommon for it to take a significantly longer time to get the same point across, because I'm working with somebody who's understanding things differently. Not wrong, not badly, just differently. And it's not an easy thing to do. And it is harder for the athlete as well. It's not just harder on the coach, it is harder on the athlete, because I'm explaining it the same way to all these other people. And to this person, it's just not making sense. And they're watching everybody else get it and understand it from this information. And that information is not working the same way for them.
Yeah. I coached some of the para programs at CRI. And like you, I've coached a blind and a deaf athlete. So with the visually impaired rower, we use a lot of angles, a lot of body description. Then for our deaf rower, we've actually picked up some sign language. So again, it's not an easy communication barrier, but we took the time to learn. We're not fluent in sign, but can get a good amount in. And I wish people took the same time to invest in neurodivergent athletes who struggle with communication.
Part of it is education. Part of it is simply going back on that invisible disability thing. It's if somebody can't see and they walk into something, or if somebody can't hear you and you figure that out eventually, great. You now know very simply you have to work with those things. But if somebody is not understanding you right away, it's really easy to turn around and just blame that on the person not trying hard enough or not paying enough attention. And that's not the case. Again, the number of kids that I work with that are on the spectrum or ADHD, and trying to integrate them in with the other 40 kids I might have on the water at that one practice. We did a coaching training this morning for some of our summer staff, and it was based around the entire Learn to Row curriculum that we have. So we had people who are mostly going to be coaching the high school athletes. We spent just about as much time on the differences that you have to deal with middle school athletes versus high school as we did anything else, because when you're starting to work with people in different developmental stages, the information they need and how you give it to them changes. When you're working with people who are neurodivergent, who have developed differently, now we have those same challenges back again. And it's not that the things that you have learned for how you're going to teach things become useless, but you have to grow your toolbox a bit. There's a lot. You have to expand how you explain things, what you're looking for, and that's the thing. And we've seen this in other things. When you start working to accommodate people with disabilities, it makes it better for everybody. Think about something as basic as curb cuts, right? Makes it a lot easier for all of us to get across the street or to push a stroller or a shopping cart or whatever we need to do, even though the point originally was for wheelchairs. When we're looking at this from a coaching and competing standpoint, if our coaches and coxswains are trained to go and explain things in multiple ways, pay more attention to how somebody's getting it, how the information is being received, that makes it easier for everybody to understand what's going on.
Yeah, and I don't feel like it even needs to be a substantial amount of training. Maybe like an hour, and you can get a grasp of what each person needs. Or simply, I find this is the case with a lot of people with disabilities. Simply asking or talking, have a conversation about, how can I help? What do you think this means? So you're saying it like this. How can we get you to say it like this? And I feel like our societies in general is a little afraid of that. Again, like you were saying, it's a taboo topic per se. People are, I feel like, again, are afraid, feeling they'll be judged. And that's where we get this wall we're hitting with inclusion. Not only in sports, but just in life in general.
We've been, over the last couple of decades, moving a lot further away from a more authoritarian coaching structure into something that is more of a give and take. And one of the best things you can do is, like you said, ask and listen and believe. If somebody says they're struggling with something, believe that they're struggling with that, not that they're not trying hard enough. Believe that there's something that's making it harder for them to do, and help them find a way around that. But you have to listen to your athletes, and you really have to, they're not going to trust you if you don't trust them. So trust that what they're saying about their experience is real. And that goes a long way to making all of this work.
Of course.
Of course is great, but it's taken a long time to get to that point, and not everybody's there yet.
Yeah, I
Still a
think
work in progress.
it's as you have been just talking and working through those ideas, like I think back to athletes that I've had and assumptions you make as a coach, whether it be the coxswain who, like you were saying, who didn't have the inflection that you were trying to instruct them with and trying to help them to do, and then becoming frustrated because it was something that that I wasn't teaching them correctly in a way that they could understand, that they could learn. And I think coaches are really hungry for this type of information. I think it could really be helpful to, like you said, have more tools in your toolbox so that because I was assistant coaching for a team this past spring, and you have 30 or 40 athletes all coming together. They're coming from different places because as a college team, people don't necessarily they're from Rochester. They may be from far away. So you have geographical differences that they're dealing with. They're with new people. I think of athletes who have trouble like making friends, keeping friends on the team, and how their interactions and arguments could be leaning into something that maybe I should already know about, and then be able to be more helpful as a coach with helping them manage those relationships, because there might be something underlying that's keeping them from that situation and being able to rectify it themselves and being able to step in as a coach and be supportive. I think of the athletes who have trouble waking up in the morning for the 5:45 class or 5:45 practice, and being able to like, why can't they get in the car with their friends? Why do they need somebody to wake them up? Like why? And now that I look back at that, I'm like, oh my gosh, there could be an adaptation or something that they needed from me to help facilitate that I wasn't aware of. So I think this is really powerful as a coach. Just you guys are helping me to be able to recognize that like it might just not be like it could be the lack of motivation that we see as a coach on the outside of it. It could be something else that we need to be supportive in and accommodating to in order to create a creative solution so that this person feels more welcomed and more a part of the team and able to participate. And especially because the sport's therapeutic. I was saying that to wrote it in the chat, it's a piece of something that helps athletes feel supported, helps you get through, whether it's a college or a moment in your life or a high school moment in your life. There's a lot of things that can be in flux, and rowing can be that stable thing that kind of can make you feel really good about yourself. And as a coach, you want to make sure that all of your athletes are feeling supported. And as a coach, you're aware of how to best support those athletes. And you guys were talking about, do you have a course or a PDF or some type of document to share with coaches out there? I'd love to get something out there. Or have you guys create something that they could share? Yeah.
We don't have one yet. We have a group chat going on. Sorry, I'm speaking for all of us, but we have a group chat going on where anyone is welcome to join if they want to message me or Alexandra or Brian. And we would love to have more athletes join. And if they have any input, just to be able to add to our conversation, what we're saying. And I think that's our goal, is to have a list of things that we want to implement in these first steps and make it more feasible for people to access at the local regatta level, and then take it one step bigger, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and then not necessarily for rowing, but there is a page called the Autism Self-Advocacy Network. I know they sometimes do stories from other athletes, mostly from the UK, who have autism. High-level athletes, local athletes, so that's always good. There are some journals about autism. The DSM-5, the diagnostic criteria is always great, but that's a big read. I'd recommend looking up, maybe even a blog, someone's experience with autism. And especially since you coach at the college level, college students with autism, even on a blog, again, Reddit maybe. That's not your most reliable source. However, it is real people's experience. And then same thing for the youth level.
I think one thing I want to point out, I'd done other sports before I started rowing, but rowing to me it was the first time I really felt a part of a team in that same way. We talk about rowing being the ultimate team sport in so many ways, and we understand that because we've been through that. But it was so important to me. I really do want to be able to share that with anybody who wants to do it. I would like that to be an option for anybody, to be able to have that same sense of belonging that I got from joining the team. And when I see people struggling to mesh with the team because of things like this, I want to find a way to help. This is really why I do what I do. It's why I work with middle school kids. I get to be their first entry into the sport. We do a lot of work work with middle school programs in conjunction with our community program at Oakland Strokes. We work with a lot of the Oakland schools with the kids that did not have access to any of this. Were often their first experience with any kind of water sport at all. Just really trying to get as many people down to the boathouse as we can. Let them see a part of this world that we all know and love. And whether it's masters, I coached novice for years, whether it's juniors, whether it's adaptive sports, para. This is something that has been important to all of us in so many ways. And I would feel really bad if we didn't give other people the opportunity to experience what we've gotten out of this.
And just to wrap things up, how can people get in touch with each of you? Like, where's the best spot? Is it an email address or is it a direct message somewhere? Where would be the best that people reach out to you if they're interested in being a part of the group checks or just chatting with you directly?
Yeah, for me, email's the best way. I can state it and then put it in the chat as well. It's just my first name, last name, AlexandrawWalsh, and then the number's 2828@gmail.com. I'm going to type that in the chat as well.
Email is probably best for me as well. I'll put it in the chat here because I'm trying to remember which one it is I want to use. Not actually the one that I gave you earlier for this, but there we go. Just coachbrianmarcais@gmail.com is a good one for me on that.
Email is also probably best for me. I'll leave it in the group chat as well. And I'll be collaborating with Adrian and making a post that will hopefully be accessible for everyone to, if they want to join, we'll make it accessible enough to make it work in that sort of way where even they wouldn't have to reach out or email, but we will figure it out and make it the most accessible possible.
Awesome. And then if anyone ever wants to talk to me about being a collegiate athlete with a neurodiverse disability, especially autism, because I've had that lived experience, I would love to.
Yeah, it's amazing. And on the podcast, what I'm trying to do right now is collect as many stories as possible about rowing and about life. So because as a physical therapist, a lot of the people I've been interacting with are someone who has a physical injury. So they come on the podcast and they talk about their physical injury and how it affected their rowing and how they got back to it, and kind of giving people a framework to work with. But it would be great to do maybe a whole podcast with you out there about this front end to back end, what was helpful, how your coaches helped you, the things that you were encountering, and by just telling those stories, and those stories get out there. And as rowers are looking for a space to figure out, I'm going through this, I haven't heard of anyone else who's gone through this, I can listen to this podcast now and I can take that experience and help it with my experience. Yeah, that would be nice. Yeah, that would be that, and it's similar. It would be just like this. So we just chat and you just riff on everything that you've been working through and how your coaches helped you, and the roadblocks too. I try to tell people that they don't have to sugarcoat the experience. Some people, when they come back from an injury, it's not all rainbows and butterflies, and you get to a point where potentially, I just did a podcast with someone who said they may not necessarily get fully back to rowing, and they're working through that. And for people to be able to listen to that and to understand that, and letting there be a space for going 100% into rowing, and then having when you can take that step back and still love the sport, but not necessarily have to push yourself to be a part of it if it's not the fit for your life at that time.
Oh yeah, it wasn't a perfect experience, but it's one of the best things that's ever happened to me.
It's fabulous. I love that. Anyone have any closing thoughts before we wrap up? And I might hold you guys to this idea of a neurodivergent toolbox PDF for coaches or something like that. I don't know. I think that would be really cool just to get that out there in the world and start creating resources for people to grab on the fly and to be aware of. I think that would be fabulous.
Yeah, there's a really basic course on US Rowing site on the launch, but any more information we can get out there for people would be great.
I have a Canva membership, so that'll be so fun for me. and us to the team, but I love little fun things like that.
Oh my gosh, there's an ebook in your future. I can imagine that.
Oh, most definitely.
There is something I want to say. Sorry, it might sound really cheesy, but I just want to commemorate both like everyone that came on here and spoke about something. It's not easy to do that and to be your true honest self on something like this on a platform where we are trying to make change. And I just like, I'm literally sitting in my own little corner crying over here. Just thank you for being willing to be a voice and to be willing to others to hear your story. And just, yeah, you guys are awesome.
Thank you. And then going off of something Joanna said earlier, really quick, this is my last thought.
Go ahead.
US Rowing does a wonderful job with inclusion with people of different backgrounds. We're just hoping this is the next step. And we'd love to see more neurodivergent athletes in the sport. You don't necessarily have to be vocal about it, right? That's not everyone's cup of tea. But if we get one more person who has autism or ADHD to join rowing after this, spectacular. And then maybe they can get one of their friends who has neurodivergency or another disability into rowing. Great.
And that's the goal. This is the sport that we love so much. And we've talked about how good it is for us. And, rowing's my happy place, and getting out there on the water and being able to share that with other people. That's the big goal. So thank you guys so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you and sharing your stories. I think that there'll be people out there who will really enjoy this and really gain a lot from it, because I learned a lot from you three just in the little bit of time that we spent together. So that's really special, and I appreciate that.
Thank you for having us. It was wonderful talking to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for taking the time on this busy week of yours, too. Congratulations to your son again.
Thank you. My son's graduating next week on Saturday from high school. So we're in the throes of all the stuff that you do and the running around. We just came back from an awards thing for sports. We're all over the place, but I'm glad that we were able to stand. You can see behind me Eastern Standard Time. It's getting dark now, but I just appreciate that you guys were able to get together and start this conversation. I don't think this conversation's ending. I think this is the beginning of this conversation, and we'll be able to expand and share more with people about things that are happening, events that they can go to, regattas they can participate in, regattas that will then have categories for neurodivergent athletes. I think it's just going to be amazing. So thanks again. And I will keep you guys posted with all the happenings on my end.
Thanks for listening to the episode. We have partnered with the Crew Stop. Do you need new rowing gloves? Check out thecrewstop.com. Save 15% with the code ROWINGONTHESQUARE, all capitals. If you want to work with Adrian, check out the show notes to schedule a call, or the newly updated ROWINGONTHESQUARE.com website for details. Please like, subscribe, follow, thumbs up, anything Rowing on the Square on all social platforms. It helps out so much. And share this podcast with your friends. Happy rowing, everyone.